A 21-year-old girl lost the biggest match of her career 5 days earlier, and instead of hiding, she walked into a wooden house on a stage in Sweden and danced like her whole world hadn't just fallen apart. And what happened after that single night is something almost nobody is talking about the right way. Stay with me for the next 15 minutes, because this story is not about a concert. It is about a moment that reveals exactly who Eala really is when nobody is watching the scoreboard. And by the end of this video, you're going to see her completely differently. But before I take you inside that room in Stockholm, I need you to do something for me first. If stories like this one, the quiet human moments behind the headlines, are the reason you keep coming back to this channel, then hit subscribe right now. Because I promise you, what happens in the next few minutes is going to stay with you, and I don't want you to miss the next chapter of this story when it drops. Subscribe now, because this is only the beginning. Let's get into it. You've probably already seen the headline. Filipino fans chant her name at a Bad Bunny concert, and it goes viral. That headline has been racing across Filipino tennis TikTok for 6 days straight. But here's the thing nobody is telling you. The real story is bigger than that headline, and it's quieter, and it has almost nothing to do with a chant. It has to do with a small wooden house. Not a real house. A stage prop that Bad Bunny carries with him on every stop of his world tour. Shaped like the old rural Puerto Rican homes his grandparents' generation would have known. Timber painted, unmistakable. It's called La Casita, the little house, and it sits at the edge of the main stage. On paper, it functions as an invite-only VIP section. But that is not what it actually is. What it actually is a symbol, and once you understand what that symbol means, everything that happened next is going to hit completely differently. Bad Bunny built this entire tour around one idea, that a diaspora doesn't have to leave its home behind. It can carry that home outward, wherever it goes. La Casita is that idea standing upright under stage lights, in whatever city he lands in that week. And on the night of Friday, July 10th, 2026, La Casita was in Stockholm. Inside it, dancing, was a 21-year-old Filipina named Eala. Just 5 days earlier, she had walked off center court at Wimbledon to a full standing ovation after losing a round of 16 match in 3 sets. That ovation wasn't for the loss. It was for the run itself, because she had just become the first Filipina in history to reach the 4th round of a Grand Slam singles tournament. As of that week's ranking release, she sat at world number 28, a brand new career high, and the highest-ranked Filipino tennis player who has ever lived. Those are the numbers. But the real story is what happened in the quiet corridor between them, and that's exactly where we're headed next. So stay with me, because when a clip of her inside La Casita hit the internet on July 12th, the reaction inside the Filipino tennis community wasn't what you'd expect. It wasn't uniform at all. Some fans openly wonder whether a player just 5 days off a heartbreaking slam loss should even be at a concert like this. There's a long, quiet current in Filipino sports culture, inherited more than universal, but very real, that treats visibility outside of training as some kind of warning sign, as if the only correct posture after a loss is silence and discipline. But others push back immediately and hard. One fan's comment, later reprinted by a Manila outlet, put it as plainly as possible. She's 21. Alex needs a party once in a while. Don't grow old on the tennis court. Balance is the key. And here's the part that should really make you pause. The numbers actually back that fan up completely. She flew from Stockholm to Manila the very next morning. 2 days later, she walked into a formal state reception at the presidential palace. Her ranking held. Her Wimbledon points held. The concert cost her absolutely nothing. If anything, it revealed something the tennis coverage had been completely missing this entire time. She is not a project. She is a person who just happens to compete at the top level of a global sport. Keep that thought in your head, because it's going to matter a lot by the end of this video. Let's rewind to the corridor itself, because the small details are where the real meaning lives. July 6th, center court, Wimbledon. Her opponent takes the 3rd set after Eala had led it. Eala shakes hands, waves at the crowd, and the crowd rises to its feet. Wimbledon's own official account posts a clip that same afternoon with one simple caption honoring her standing ovation. For days past, whatever a top 30 player does in the days right after a Grand Slam exit, she does exactly that. She travels. She lands in Sweden, and on the night of Friday, July 10th, she walks into Strawberry Arena in Stockholm for night one of Bad Bunny's world tour. Now, here's where it gets interesting, because the room she walked into wasn't random, and once you understand what that room represented, this story starts to feel almost impossible to have happened any other way. Bad Bunny's current album and tour are built around a specific cultural argument, that the diaspora is not something you simply survive. It's a home you build wherever you land. That tour has been widely covered across the Latin American press as one of the largest post-pandemic diaspora cultural projects in popular music. La Casita, that small wooden house on stage, is the emotional center of that entire argument, and fans invited inside it are, in a small way, being invited into that idea itself. On the night of July 10th, one of the people standing inside that wooden house was a Filipino tennis player from a country whose overseas population numbers roughly 10.9 million people. Two peoples who both understand exactly what it means to carry a homeland outward, meeting completely by chance inside a wooden house on a stage in Sweden. That was the room. And what happened inside it next is the part almost nobody expected. At some point during the show, while Bad Bunny performed from the La Casita platform, Eala was among the guests invited to dance with him and his crew. Multiple attendees captured the moment on camera, and major outlets later corroborated the footage. She's visible in the background in a party dress, moving in and out of frame for extended stretches of the show. She's not a plant. She's not staged. Watch the clip honestly, and she looks exactly like what she is, a 21-year-old at a concert, letting go for one night. But here's the twist that makes this whole story even more remarkable, and it involves a videographer who had absolutely no idea who she was filming. Her name is Mayumi Torio, a Filipino content creator who happened to be in Sweden on vacation and scored last-minute tickets to the show. In an interview she later gave, Torio described the exact moment she realized who she was looking at. At first, she thought it was just someone who looked like Eala, because she wasn't used to seeing her in a party dress, only tennis clothes or formal wear. Then she recognized her for Real. In her own words, for someone who loves fashion, she was in awe of how Eala stood out in the crowd, this beautiful Filipina dancing with genuine, natural energy on stage. And from that moment on, her camera never left her. That is how. Without either of them planning a single second of it, most of the footage that would circulate globally the very next morning came to exist. Take a breath here, because this is exactly where the story stops being about a concert and starts being about who this girl really is. And what happens next might be the most important detail in this entire video. The day after the concert, Eala, world number 28, only 1 week removed from that Wimbledon heartbreak, personally messaged Mayumi Torio to ask if she could use the clips. Torio described the tone of that message in a way that stopped me in my tracks. She said it sounded like a friend from home, warm, youthful, like a message from your barcada, your closest circle of chosen friends, the crew you grew up with, and that one single word might be the whole story. Because everything that followed, the trending clip, the hero's welcome at the airport, the presidential citation 2 days later, all of it depended entirely on her still being that reachable, still being the kind of 21-year-old who messages a total stranger morning after a concert and sounds exactly like a friend. That is what this clip captured, without anyone even realizing it was capturing it at all. She posted her own compilation later that day, stitched together using Torio's footage, with a caption written entirely in Spanish, a language she picked up training her formative years in Mallorca. She didn't translate it. She just let it sit there, untranslated, for whoever was ready to read it in whatever language they had. It said, "While one is alive, one must love as much as one can." By the next day, July 12th, that clip had traveled everywhere. Sports pages, Latin American Bad Bunny fan accounts, Filipino tennis TikTok, European entertainment coverage tracking the tour. One Manila outlet captured the strangeness of it perfectly in a single sentence, saying she trended twice in one day, in two completely different worlds, one abroad, one back home. Because on that exact same day, while the Stockholm clip was still spreading, Eala landed at Manila's International Airport to an absolute hero's welcome. Flowers, officials, crowds of fans. The same tennis player who had been dancing on a Bad Bunny stage tonight before was now walking through arrivals being handed bouquets by total strangers. And it doesn't stop there, because the very next day, she was inside the presidential palace itself. The president hosted a formal reception, and in his own words, called himself a fan. And then he said something that made the entire room go quiet for a moment. He told her, "You never fail to remind everyone that you are Filipina." Sit with that line for a second, because it's not really about tennis at all. It's a formal acknowledgement from the very top of a nation that the story of that week was never about a ranking. It was about visibility itself. But if you ask me which voice in this story matters more, it isn't the president's. It's Torio's, because Torio was actually in the room before it became a headline, and her line about the barcada is the one I keep coming back to. In that same interview, she said something else that now almost reads like a mission statement for the entire story. The best content isn't always planned. Sometimes it's simply being ready when the moment happens. That line describes her job as a videographer perfectly, but it also, completely by accident, describes exactly what Eala did in Stockholm. She wasn't planning to end up on that stage. She was simply ready when the moment found her. Now zoom out with me for a second, because the stakes here go far beyond one concert, and this next part is going to explain why the next 2 weeks matter so much. Alex Eala, at world number 28, is now the first Filipino tennis player in history to hold an automatic seated position heading into the North American hardcourt swing. That means direct entry, no qualifying, straight into Montreal, into Cincinnati, and into the U.S. Open itself in late August. Her Wimbledon run also broke a record that had stood since the amateur era, going all the way back to the late 1940s and early 1950s. 73 years of ceiling, cleared in a single fortnight, by a 21-year-old who hasn't even come close to hitting the top of anything yet. Her very next confirmed appearance is a combined ADP and WTA event in Washington, D.C., running from July 27th through August 2nd, and she is already listed on the official singles entry list. It will be her first competitive match after everything, after Wimbledon, after Stockholm, after the Palace, after the packed fan meet back home that drew crowds pressed against velvet ropes. And when she walks onto that hard court, it will be an ordinary tennis match again. A first-round draw, a warm-up, a serve, everything else behind her. Which brings this story back, one more time, to the loss itself, because none of the last week of races would actually happen on that court. She was up a break in the third set and lost her serve before all, then dropped the final 3 games in a row. Match reports described the sequence with an almost clinical precision, the exact same fight that carried her past a defending champion 2 rounds earlier, simply running out at the very end. She walked off center court to a standing ovation anyway, and 5 days later, she was in Stockholm dancing. So here is where this story really lands, and I want you to picture with me one more time before we go. Center court, Wimbledon, a standing ovation. La Casita, Stockholm, a stage built on the idea of home. Manila's airport, arrivals, flowers, a hero's welcome. The presidential palace, a formal citation. A packed fan meet, phones raised in every direction. And in just 2 weeks, a quiet hardcore in Washington, D.C., under floodlights, with no crowd chanting her name, no wooden house on stage, just a court, an opponent, and a serve. She is walking through rooms that no Filipino athlete before her has ever been invited into. And based on everything we actually know, inside every single one of those rooms, she is still exactly the same person. The one who messages a stranger the morning after a concert and sounds like a friend from home. That word, barcada, might be doing more work in this story than any ranking number ever could. Not a number, not a title, a room. And she chose, in her own caption, not to translate a single word of it. While one is alive, one must love as much as one can. She left it exactly like that, for anyone ready to read it. So here's my question for you before you go, and I genuinely want to know, when she walks onto that court in Washington in just a few days, does a girl from the wooden house in Stockholm show up with her? Or does something change the moment the lights turn competitive again? I have a feeling we're all about to find out together, and I don't want you to miss a single second of it. If this is your first time on this channel, We cover this tour the way it deserves to be covered, the wins, the losses, and the quiet weeks in between where the real story actually lives. Subscribe right now if you want the Washington, D.C. build up the moment it drops. And tell me in the comments which room in this story hit you the hardest. I read every single one.